Okay, so get this. Imagine being so desperate for some focused thinking time that you go out and build a whole stone tower in the woods just to get away from distractions. I mean, come on, that sounds a little extreme, right?
Right.
Well, believe it or not, that's what the famous psychologist Carl Jung actually did.
Wow.
And today, we are diving deep, no pun intended, into deep work by Cal Newport to figure out if maybe, just maybe, Jung was onto something that all of us, especially in this day and age, really need.
It's funny because when you hear that story about Jung, it almost sounds like, oh, what an eccentric, quirky thing to do. But what's so fascinating is that this desire for depth, this need to go deep, it's not some weird quirk. It's actually hardwired into us as humans. Our brains literally evolved to pay attention really closely to one thing, to bring all of our mental resources to bear on a single challenge, not to be juggling, 20 tabs in an inbox that's overflowing.
So we're biologically built for this deep work thing, but then the modern world comes along and is like, you need to be on all the time.
Yeah. And the thing is, when we talk about deep work, this intense concentration on a single demanding task, it does way more than just help us power through our to-do lists. Although, let's be honest, that's a nice perk, right? But what's really cool is that neuroscience is now showing that this kind of deep work actually connects us to something way more profound, more meaningful. Increased meaning, this lasting sense of satisfaction, even joy in the process of the work itself. It's all linked to how deeply we engage with what we're doing.
Okay, I'm sold. Time to throw my phone in a drawer and head for the mountains. But before I go full hermit mode, can you give us an example, a real-world story of this depth in action?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's this writer, Winifred Gallagher, and she gets diagnosed with a really aggressive cancer. And, understandably, it's scary, it's overwhelming. But here's what she does. Instead of letting the fear kind of consume her, she makes this conscious choice to focus her attention on what brings her joy, even in the midst of, cancer treatment. And she actually ends up writing this incredible book called Wrapped, all about, you guessed it, the science of attention. And her story is just this really powerful testament to how the things we choose to focus on, even when things are tough, it can literally shape our experience, our reality.
I mean, that's an amazing story. And what's so striking is this. In a world, and we talk about this all the time, that feels like it demands us to be plugged in and on 24/7. You're telling me that this thing, deep work, it actually makes us more valuable, not less. Explain that one to me.
Yeah, it is definitely counterintuitive, especially given all the demands on our attention these days. But it all boils down to this really profound shift that's happening, something that economists are calling the Great Restructuring.
Okay, the Great Restructuring sounds ominous. Lay it on me.
It is big, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Basically, think of it this way. Technology, and this is happening at warp speed, is fundamentally changing the game of work. It's changing what work gets done, and even more importantly, it's changing who is doing that work. So you've got certain jobs that are honestly disappearing altogether. Others are transforming into something totally new, and we're seeing entirely new types of work being created out of thin air practically every day.
So where does this whole deep work thing fit into this Great Restructuring? What's the connection?
You're asking the right questions. That is the million-dollar question, right? Because here's the deal. In this rapidly evolving landscape of work, the ability to really, truly focus deeply on something, to concentrate without getting distracted, it's not just the nice-to-have skill anymore. It's becoming the rare and incredibly valuable skill to have. And the reason for that is that deep work, it's how we develop the kind of expertise, the kind of real hardcore skills that machines, at least for now, can't replicate.
So it's about, like, future-proofing ourselves.
Yeah.
I like it. Give me an example, though. Put this into context for me.
Okay, perfect example. Think about Nate Silver, the guy who everyone calls a data wizard because he's predicted, like, the last few elections with crazy accuracy.
Oh, yeah, that guy. He's got a brain I wouldn't mind picking, that's for sure.
Totally. And he's a great example of what we're talking about. So, yes, he obviously uses incredibly powerful algorithms, right? He's working with intelligent machines. But what makes him so valuable, so sought after, isn't just his ability to crunch numbers. It's what he does with that data afterwards. It's his ability to then take all that information, analyze it deeply, and produce these incredibly insightful, nuanced forecasts that go way beyond what any algorithm could do on its own. And that, my friend, is depth work in action in this new world we're living in.
Okay, I'm convinced. Deep work. It's this super rare, super valuable skill that can help us not just survive, but actually thrive in a world where technology is changing everything.
Yeah.
So we've established that in this whole new world of work that's changing all the time, deep work, it's like having a superpower.
It really is.
But and you knew there was a but coming.
Always a but.
But it's really hard to actually like sit down and do the deep work thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm raising my hand here because honestly, my inbox alone sometimes stresses me out so much that I just want to go hide under my desk. So why is it such a struggle for us?
Yeah.
Especially when we know it's good for us. It's like we're fighting against our own brain.
It's the paradox of our time, right?
Yeah.
We're almost like addicted to being busy. It's like this weird badge of honor that we wear. It's like, oh, look at me, I'm so busy, I'm so important. But here's the thing. We've fallen into this trap of thinking that just being busy automatically equals being productive. And you know what? A lot of times it's the exact opposite. Oh my gosh, are you spying on my life? Because you just described, like, my average Tuesday. I swear, I'll have days where I feel like I haven't stopped moving for a single second. But then when someone asks me, well, what did you actually do today? I'm like,
And that's exactly what I mean by this idea of shallow work. It's that feeling of always being on, always reacting to emails, getting sucked into meetings that could have been an email, you know the ones I'm talking about, and all the while you're telling yourself that you're being productive because, hey, at least you're not just sitting around, right? Okay, yep, guilty as charged. But I do have a question about this whole deep work thing. So you're saying no more meetings, no more collaboration. What about those water cooler moments that spark new ideas? I mean, we've all been told for years that those open office layouts, those are supposed to be more creative, right? More conducive to, brainstorming and innovating.
yeah, you're right. There's definitely been a lot of hype around those like serendipitous moments of connection. But the truth is, it's a bit more complicated than that. The reality is more nuanced. So let's break it down, right? Let's look at a classic example. Bell Labs, back in the day, they actually designed their entire workspace, like physically designed it, with these really long hallways and communal areas. The whole point was to encourage these kinds of random interactions between people who might not normally cross paths.
Interesting. So they were intentional about it. Like they actually thought about it when they were designing the space.
Exactly. This wasn't just by chance. This was intentional design. And guess what? It worked. This deliberate design, it actually fostered a ton of collaboration, and that led to some really groundbreaking stuff, really important breakthroughs. Now, let's compare that with another famous example, MIT's Building 20.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Hit me with the Building 20 story.
So on the surface, it was kind of similar, right? It had this open plan, no cubicles or anything. But the key difference here, and it's a big one, is that Building 20 wasn't designed with this intentional collaboration in mind. It wasn't about, hey, let's get people talking. It just happened to be a cheap and flexible space that they had.
Okay, so similar open layout, but really different outcomes.
Exactly. What Bell Labs teaches us is that, yes, collaboration can be amazing. But for it to really work, for it to lead to great things, it needs intention. It can't just be, oh, we're all in the same room, so magic will happen. Just being physically near each other without that thoughtfulness, that design, it can actually backfire. You might end up with an environment that actually hinders deep work without guaranteeing any of the supposed benefits of all that collaboration.
That actually makes a lot of sense. I'm starting to think maybe I've been sold a myth about these open office layouts.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've officially debunked the myth of the open office. But now let's get practical, because here's the million-dollar question. How do we actually do deep work? I mean, I'm fired up. I'm ready to ditch all the distractions, throw my phone in a drawer, and level up my focus game. But where do we even start?
I love the enthusiasm. And it's a great question because it really starts with being intentional. It's about making a conscious choice to say, this deep work, this is important to me, and I'm going to make it happen. Think of it kind of like choosing your own adventure. You need a depth philosophy. It's basically a personalized approach to how you're going to integrate this whole deep work thing into your actual everyday life.
Okay, depth philosophy. I like it. Break it down for me. What are some of these philosophies, and which one is, right for me?
So Cal Newport, he lays out 4 main ones in the book. So you could go full-on monastic, right? Like channel your inner monk and basically isolate yourself from the world to eliminate all distractions. That's one way to do it. Or maybe like the bimodal approach is more your style. This is where you're basically carving out these really intense chunks of time for deep work, but you're accepting that there will be other periods where, yeah, you're going to have to do some of that shallow work.
So it's like finding a balance.
Exactly. It's about finding what works for you, your life, and your work style. And then you've got the rhythmic approach. This is all about making deep work a regular, consistent habit, like it's just built into your week. And finally, there's the journalistic philosophy.
Mhm.
And this one's about squeezing in deep work whenever you can find a free moment, even if it's just for like 15, 20 minutes.
Okay, so many options. It's like a deep work buffet. Can you give me an example, though, of one of these philosophies in action? Like, what does this actually look like in the real world?
Yeah, for sure. Let's take the journalistic approach, for example. Think about someone like Walter Isaacson. He's the guy who wrote those massive biographies, like the one on Steve Jobs and Leonardo da Vinci, and Cal Newport talks about him in the book.
Oh, yeah, I love those books.
Right. So this guy, he's a master of finding those in-between moments. So he'd be at a cocktail party,
Right.
surrounded by people, but then he'd just like casually slip away to a quiet corner for 20 minutes, get some serious writing done, and then rejoin the party like nothing even happened.
Wow. That's
Ah.
commitment. And maybe a little bit of like ninja level stealth skills.
Yeah.
So it's really not about finding one right way to do deep work. It's about finding what works for you.
Exactly. And that's what I love about this whole concept. It's not one size fits all. It's about experimenting and figuring out what works for your personality, your work style, your life. But there is one thing that I think could be a total game changer for anyone trying to up their deep work game: ritualizing it.
Okay, ritualizing. Now, you're going to have to explain that one to me because when I hear ritual, I think like chanting and incense.
I promise, no chanting required. Think of it more like this. You're setting the stage for your brain to shift into focus mode. It could be super simple. Maybe it's always working in the same chair at the same desk, or lighting a particular candle that you love, or putting on those noise-canceling headphones. For me, it's all about having a go-to playlist that signals to my brain, okay, time to buckle down and get to work.
Okay, now you're speaking my language. I am all about a good playlist to set the mood. But you even mentioned this really intriguing concept in the book called productive meditation. Now, that sounds kind of like an oxymoron, right? Like, how can you be productive while you're trying to meditate?
Right. It does sound a bit counterintuitive, but this is where it gets really interesting. So productive meditation, it's all about taking those little moments throughout the day that we usually just kind of like waste, those in-between times, like when you're walking, showering, maybe even doing the dishes, and you're turning them into opportunities for focused thinking.
Wait, so I'm not actually meditating,
Yeah.
like sitting cross-legged and chatting. Ooh.
Nope, not unless you want to. With productive meditation, you're not trying to like empty your mind or anything. Instead, you pick one specific problem, something challenging related to your work, and you just kind of let your mind work on it in the background while you're going about these more mundane tasks. It's amazing what can come up when you least expect it.
Okay, I love this. So I could be like walking my dog, but also solving world hunger in the back of my mind. Sign me up. Okay, so far we've got philosophies, rituals, medication, but we can't talk about deep work without addressing the ultimate productivity killer: digital distractions. I'm talking about you. Endless scrolling.
Oh, yes, the Achilles heel of our modern age, right? It's
Right.
everywhere. But I think the key here is to take a page from the craftsman's playbook.
A craftsman. Okay, now you've lost me. What does, like, woodworking have to do with me trying to focus on my computer?
More than you might think. So a true craftsman, they're not just going to use every single tool they can get their hands on, right? They're going to be really intentional about choosing the tools that are absolutely essential for their craft. And we need to apply that same thinking to our digital tools, especially social media. Like, really ask yourself, is this tool truly, truly essential for my work? Is it actually helping me? Or am I just using it out of habit because, well, it's there?
It's about moving beyond that any benefit mindset. Just because a tool exists or because everyone else is using it, that doesn't mean I have to.
Exactly. You've got to be ruthless. I mean, think about some of the most successful authors out there, people like Malcolm Gladwell or Michael Lewis. These guys have huge followings, they're at the top of their game, but they've both said publicly that they avoid social media like the plague. And if they can achieve that level of success without it, it really makes you question this assumption that we all have to be plugged in all the time, right?
It's true. It really does make you think. One thing that's really resonated with me throughout this entire conversation about deep work, it's not just about like getting more stuff done, although I'm always down for that.
Hmm.
It's this idea that when we work deeply, we're actually tapping into something way more meaningful. It's about aligning our actions with our values, about finding that sense of purpose in our work.
Yes, 100%. And that's where the real magic happens, in my opinion. It's not just about checking things off a to-do list. It's about creating a life of intention, of meaning, and honestly, of joy in the work itself.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we find that kind of deep satisfaction in our work?
Well, remember that craftsman we were talking about? Think about the pride they take in their skills, the care they put into creating something of value. Deep work gives us that opportunity no matter what we do. It allows us to bring that same level of craftsmanship, that same level of dedication to any kind of work, whether we're writing code, designing a website, or even, responding to email. It's about approaching everything we do with intention and with excellence.
So it's about finding that sweet spot, that intersection of our skills, our passions, what the world needs, and then just diving deep into that space.
Exactly. And you know what? It might take some trial and error, some exploration to find that sweet spot. But once you do and you commit to going deep, that's when the really amazing stuff starts to happen.
It's like Cal Newport says at the end of Deep Work. He challenges himself to a year of what he calls radical depth. Can you imagine? A whole year of that level of focus. But maybe for now we start a little smaller. What could you, listening right now, accomplish if you committed to going deep for just 1 week? What could you create? What breakthroughs might be waiting for you? That's something to think about. And on that note, that's it for our deep dive into deep work. Until next time, stay focused.